Hey guys, 2D Gamer here, and doing a bit of an unscripted review real quick. Some quick well, as quick as I can be, thoughts on Doom on the Super Nintendo. And, um, I really like those weird ports to underpowered systems of games that they shouldn't be able to run at all, that somehow still manage to be completely playable, even if they're not as spectacular as, the original version. And Doom on the Super Nintendo is one of those ports. It's just, like, it's a Super Nintendo, and it's running a surprisingly playable, not the greatest home port of the game. In fact, as far as the playability, probably the worst. But it's still, like, I mean, it has more levels than the 32X version, better sound than the 32X version, but doesn't play as smoothly as any of the other versions. But it's still kind of an amazing port, and when you think about the time at which it was released, if all you had was a Super Nintendo, you had almost the entire, I mean, I think you have 3 episodes. I'm not sure what the levels are. I'd have to, there's a guide on game FAQs or game fakes or game fox or whatever it is you call it. Everyone calls it something different, but that shows you which levels each home port of Doom has, and it actually, I haven't looked at it recently, but I remember looking at it, and has a surprisingly good amount of levels. And remember, this is a Super Nintendo cartridge. It's not it's not a CD. It's not like the PS1, which I'm not sure how many levels the PS1 version had. It may have had them all, or I'd have to go back and double check, but still, I mean, you have Doom on the Super Nintendo, and when you think about how much it would cost to get Doom on any other platform at that time, I mean, think about it. You had to have a PC, which at the time, I've said it before, there was no such thing as a $400 Dell. I mean, it was a couple $1,000s just for a computer back in the early 90s, and most people I knew never had one unless their dad had to have it for work or something. It was always something specifically for work. It wasn't quite as, as widespread, having a computer in your home. But, so you had to have a PC, which is a few $1,000s, and you had to have a PC that was powerful enough to run Doom, and, or if you wanted a console version, when you think about it, it would be the cost of an Atari Jaguar, a 3DO, PS1, or 32X. And, so, cost effectively, this was pretty much the budget version of Doom, and for how it turned out, on such an underpowered console, it's actually, like I said, it's a pretty remarkable port. To get a good idea, think of if they had managed to make Doom 3 on the PS2, somehow make it run, have most of the levels and most of the stuff without cutting it out, and just imagine how that would have been. It would have been a degraded port, obviously, but it still would have been pretty spectacular to see and have that on the PS2. So, I mean, and there's other ports, that I like to get that were kind of remarkable ports throughout history, like if you've ever played Quake 2 on the PS1, or even Quake on the Saturn, ports for like heavy-duty processing PCs at the time. You needed a Voodoo graphics card for Quake, and a Voodoo 2, was ideal for Quake 2, and they still had like some really playable, pretty good ports. Obviously not PC perfect, but whatever is, I think the only close to PC perfect port I've ever played was Unreal Tournament 3 on the PS3, and that's because it had open mod support, which was actually pretty amazing. I think those websites have been shut down anyway. But as far as playability, yeah, it is sluggish, and when action gets heavy, yeah, sometimes it is hard to move around, and it does affect gameplay somewhat. But again, this is the Super Nintendo, and pretty much it was an incredible port for its time. But in hindsight, looking back, can I suggest the Super Nintendo version as more than just sort of a curiosity, or for people who um, had the version, you know, a nostalgic look back? And I really can't, like, as far as, unless you're like me and you like to have multiple ports of games on, you know, like every platform they were released, just, you know, to do it. I really can't suggest it unless you're nostalgic for the Super Nintendo version, because that's the version you had growing up, or because you can find Doom everywhere nowadays, and you know, PC perfect versions. But and you know, if you want like the best home console version from the 90s, I mean, you gotta get the PS1 version, which was pretty amazing. I mean, even though they didn't use the original Doom music, they turned it to more moody music, moody lighting, moody atmosphere. But you know, some people actually like that better. You know, think it's more fitting. Me, I'm kind of on the fence because I do love the original Doom music too. So, yeah. But still, PS1 version, amazing port. The only three home console ports I have are the Super Nintendo, the 32X, and the PS1. So, that's you know, and out of the three ports, obviously the PS1 is the best. But I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about the Super Nintendo version as being better than the 32X version, and in some ways it is. Like I said, music, and it has more levels, which, you know, like I said, on a Super Nintendo cartridge is pretty amazing. But as far as playability, the 32X version is easily the better version. But so in hindsight, I mean, it's still amazing. Like looking back and seeing this port, it's like amazing for its time. And so I'm not gonna like degrade it for that, you know. And you know, and like I said, I like seeing like those amazing ports that shouldn't even be possible on the console, but somehow the console handles it and gets most of all the same, you know, levels. And obviously there are cuts that had to be made and switching things around, but you know, there's no floor textures or ceiling textures, but they're really not missed. I mean, but so overall, I would, you know, like I said, I can suggest this to curious retro gamers and nostalgic fans of the, you know, if this was your home port, then, well, actually, I don't even have to suggest it to you. You should probably already have it. But, you know, overall, you know, looking back when this game was released, you know, if I was even into Doom at the time, this probably would have been the version I would have been able to afford. Even if it was, I'm not sure how much it was. I know the FX games were pretty expensive, but even if it was $100, that's still the cheapest version. You know, outside of having to buy some, you know, next-gen console or have a really nice PC. Well, for the time. So, you know, amazing port and stuff. You know, like I said, I love seeing this stuff where it's like the miraculous ports that shouldn't be, that somehow, you know, get it and make it run. So overall, yeah, I'd say it's probably the worst playing home version of the game, but it still maintains a lot of the Doom feel. The only really thing is it's a bit sluggish, and you also can't circle strafe, which isn't a big deal because I think the only home version that you could really circle strafe in was like the PS1. I don't know about the Jaguar or the 3DO versions. Actually, I haven't played the 3DO version, but I hear that if you play that on a bigger screen, or if you don't play it, like shrink it down, it's really sluggish. So, outside of maybe, you know, the 3DO version, but, sorry, I'm rambling on. But, yeah, circle strafing is on the PS1, so, but you can strafe with the trigger buttons, or you can, turn and circle, so, a little bit of practice, you get the hang of it. And yeah, action gets heavy, it gets sluggish. But overall, like I said, and I'll end it here because I'm repeating myself, you know, a million times. But still an impressive port. Not the greatest home version, but, and like I said, I can only really suggest it to nostalgic or curious gamers out there. And that's pretty much my quick, well, 9-minute opinion or 10-minute opinion of Doom on the Super Nintendo. I guess that's it.